Mount Rainier in the state of Washington. One of the most beautiful places in this country. One that you would never believe could encounter violence.
This is going to be reference case number 16-6893. I would like to get your consent to record your voice. Is it okay to do that?
Yes.
We have a 20-year-old kid who's being interviewed and interrogated about a very dangerous killer.
So let's start from the beginning.
I thought he was just gonna come pick me up and then we're gonna go beat someone's ass.
Humans are capable of terrible things, and they're capable of that with little or no motivation.
He had a crazy look on his face.
He has decided he hates him. Then he's decided he's gonna kill him.
Then all of a sudden, I heard 4 gunshots.
You have a person who acts out of instinct. His instinct is to kill. How dangerous is that? About as dangerous as you can get.
I'm Ben Elkins. I was a major crimes detective for Thurston County Sheriff's Office, located in Olympia, Washington. I had a law enforcement career for over 28 years. I always liked being challenged. Most people don't have that opportunity to see the real evil in society. But as a law enforcement officer, you had the challenge to figure out who did it and hold them accountable.
A woman who lives on a ranch calls the Thurston County Sheriff's Department to report that her boyfriend has been missing for 3 days. Detective Elkins responds to the call. This woman is Tina Inman. Her boyfriend is Clark Calhoun. He's 53 years old, and he's employed as a handyman on this ranch.
Hi. Following up on your missing persons report.
My dad came to work on this ranch, had some hard times in life. The owners of the ranch were friends, and so they saw an opportunity to help him get back on his feet.
My dad was no stranger to the farm life and to taking care of the animals and repairing things that needed to be repaired. He was somebody who could fix pretty much anything.
As a perk of his employment, he's given a space to park his trailer. So he has a trailer he lives in, and it's kept there on the property at no charge to Mr. Calhoun.
The ownership of the property was a brotherly partnership, but the one brother that lived on it owned most of the property, and then the other brother, Joel, he owned a smaller portion of it.
It was a very large piece of property. It was pushing 200 acres between the two of them.
When's the last time you saw Clark?
3 days ago.
Miss Inman explains that on the 28th of December, she, Mr. Calhoun, and another friend, Randy, were intending to go shopping in the evening. They were about to leave when Jeremy Leninger, son of one of the 2 brothers that owns the place, came up on a tractor and stopped them.
Hey, Clark.
Yeah.
He asked Clark to stay behind and help build some fences.
So Clark goes with Jeremy off to do this work, and Miss Inman and her friend Randy continue on with her shopping.
Mark? Mom?
Miss Inman returns quite late from her shopping trip,
Mark?
but Clark isn't there. So the next morning, when she wakes up, Clark still isn't there. And by the morning of the 3rd day, she decides to report this to the police.
Does Clark carry a cell phone?
No, he uses mine. He just wouldn't do something like this. I mean, he even left his wallet there.
She says, the only thing that isn't here is a turquoise and silver ring that he often wears. So Elkins thinks maybe this isn't somebody missing. Maybe it's somebody who's been done away with.
I just know something bad has happened to him.
As an investigator, there's always these things called indicators. And when I interviewed Tina, I didn't pick up on any indicators that she was involved in any foul play.
Did Clark have any enemies? Was anybody out to get him?
Not really.
Inman says no, everybody loves Clark, but there was something a few days ago that struck her as very odd. She says one of the owners mentioned to her that Jeremy, the son of the owners, had complained to her that he was missing $150, and he believed that Clark had taken this money from his truck.
Tina never indicated that Clark all of a sudden had extra money, because he would have shared that with her. They would have used it for groceries or whatever.
Okay, Tina. Here's my card. If you think of anything else.
Elkins, of course, wants to have confirmation of what Inman has to say. You cannot rely on a single source. So Elkins runs down Randy, the friend who was in the car when Clark and Inman were going to go shopping.
Excuse me, Randy. Yeah. Detective Elkin, you got a minute to speak with me?
He explains to Randy that Clark has been missing now for 3 days, and he wants to know what he recalls about the night he went missing.
3 of us were getting ready to go in town. Jeremy came and grabbed Clark, needed help doing something.
Both their statements were very consistent on the last time that they had both seen him and what transpired.
Elkins then asks Randy, has there been any confrontations with anyone that you're aware of?
No, everybody's getting along just fine here.
I understand that Jeremy thought Clark stole some money from him.
Nah, that's news to me.
Randy said they have no issues between them. So there's still this lingering question of where did this accusation come from?
If you think of anything, give us a call.
And why is that floating around out there?
So the next person to interview was Jeremy Linenger.
Jeremy's the last person that was seen with Clark, so antennas started to go up.
Jeremy, you got a minute to take a break?
Now, if you are conducting a field interview, you want to put this person on your turf, your ground, not theirs.
Why don't we speak in the car? It's cold out. Okay.
You invite him into your office that happens to have 4 wheels and an engine. It's as efficient as a building and a hell of a lot quicker.
So the 28th of December, what happened? What went on that day?
See, we started stringing some barbed wire along Jerry's fence.
And then Clark says, I've got to meet somebody out at the gate. There's somebody coming to see me.
You say who?
No, he just said, I'm gonna go meet a friend down at the gate.
Now, Jeremy introduces Mr. X into this conversation. Somebody comes to see our missing person. So who is Mr. X, and why would he have to go to the gate to see him?
That's the last time I seen him. No one saw him the rest of the night.
All right, and then tell me about the money being stolen from your truck.
I had $80 in the glove box. Someone took it, they got lost.
Okay. Did you talk to Clark about it?
No, I just figured it was gone.
Jeremy downplayed it, that it was no big deal, and he really didn't say anything in regards to it being a problem between him or Clark. All right. Anything else you can do?
No, she can leave me with a business card.
Jeremy's cooperative, friendly, reports he has nothing to hide. After Elkins interviews him, he's back to square one. Where is Mr. Calhoun? And what condition is he in?
There was a concern that maybe something had happened where he died on the property. It was a very cold time of year, and easily, if somebody would have been out in the elements, they could have easily got hypothermia and passed out or whatever.
So just as a guard against any other possibilities, he organizes a search party.
We spent several hours on the property, going everywhere we could think of. We were able to coordinate with a rescue dog organization to come out to the property with our unit.
Miss Inman provides these dogs with some of Calhoun's clothing, which contain his scent. A dog has an olfactory sense 600 times greater than a human. They can pick up a scent in the air. It's remarkable.
But at the end of the day, unfortunately, we were unable to find Clark.
No blood, no clothing, no nothing. It's just not there. And neither is Mr. Calhoun.
I had suspicions that something happened that could have been foul play, but I didn't know what yet. So what we did is initially we put out a missing person bulletin.
We began to put up a missing persons poster all over town.
Putting up the flyers for my dad really made things a reality. It really made things sink in that something was terribly wrong.
Missing persons generally are found relatively quickly. If they're not found quickly, they didn't come home because they can't. Now it's weeks later, and two environmental scientists are doing water samples 2 counties away from Thurston County. They noticed something half submerged in the bottom mud flow in a river. And half buried in this silt is the body of a Caucasian male. They notify the local county sheriff's office. They respond.
My name is Detective Lorenzo Gladson. I've been a detective for the last 6 years with the Calais County Sheriff's Office. Our first goal was to identify who this person was.
The detectives down there were aware of our missing person bolo that Ben Elkins had put out.
Yeah, I think you better get down here. Yeah, we might have found your guy.
He sees a silver and turquoise ring on one hand. Well, my. How'd you get here from 2 counties away? So Gladson calls Detective Elkins in Thurston County SO and says, I'm pretty sure I have found your missing man, Clark Calhoun.
Hey, Gladson. Hey. What do we got here?
His body was pretty dirty with mud. He was not wearing any socks or shoes.
There was no evidence that we could find at that point because it had been so long down until he'd been found.
How did he get in the middle of this river? Was he drunk? Did he have a heart attack and die and fell in the river? What happened to him? There's a long list.
At that point, we made arrangements to respond down to Cowles County Coroner's Office. And that's when I attended the autopsy.
From drifting down the river, he's going to have some injuries. He was hung up on rocks, so yeah, he's going to have some scrapes and scratches.
But when that silt is removed with a hose, it becomes rather obvious how he got in that river. He's got 2 large caliber gunshot wounds. That'll do it.
At that point, we realized that the body was likely dumped in the river, that this was not just a death investigation, but a homicide investigation.
People don't understand that bodies are very difficult to dispose of, and it'll just float away. It'll go to Mexico. It'll go to Japan. We got to get rid of this body. We got to get rid of it right now. Emotion takes over judgment in those circumstances.
in Clark's body. The doctor did find a bullet.
We measured and weighed the round. I was able to identify it as a .45 caliber round. The significance of the .45 caliber round being removed from Clark was that if we were able to later develop a suspect, we know that we're looking for a .45 caliber gun associated with that suspect.
We actually had a case where we had another homicide, and we had a bullet that was retrieved from the victim, and we had information that that same type gun had been used in target practice, and we were able to find a bullet and a shell casing, and they matched. So it helped make the case. We were hoping, to be able to find a bullet that would be in pristine condition, on the property. We now had additional leads to follow up on.
So this is the worst possible turnout of a missing persons case. Not only deceased, not only dead, but murdered. You have to tell his family, Mr. Calhoun has had his life taken.
At my dad's core, he was a good, caring, loving person. Wow. And he was amazing when I was little. But because of my dad's choices, a lot of my family had been estranged for many years.
My dad had been through some ups and downs, drug, alcohol related. And as he came back, I saw a hope for him to get his life back in a direction that was more healthy for himself and for our family.
My brother's goal was to get closer to family and try to reconnect with his children.
We made plans for my husband and I to take our kids to see him on New Year's Day. And Tina said that he was really, really excited. Well, there is no way that he would have missed a chance to see me and his grandkids.
Deep down, I had always hoped that I would have my dad back in my life. But at the same time, it brought peace knowing that he could be brought home and laid to rest. And it felt like we were going to start getting answers at that point.
Investigations change their personality as they proceed, but everything emanates from a 100-acre farm at the base of Mount Rainier. There is Jeremy Leninger, the son of the owners. There's Randy. There's Clark Calhoun's girlfriend. There's Mr. X at the front gate. They're on this little lazy Susan in the middle of this table. Who's sitting in this lazy Susan is responsible for making Mr. Calhoun collect silt in the river.
Now we're investigating a homicide, so we would have to basically start over and go back to the ranch, re-interview, and talk to everybody.
With Jeremy being the last person that had been seen with Clark, Jeremy became a real person of interest. He lived with his mother and father at the time.
Joel and Karen Kane, Jeremy's parents, who are half owners in the property, live in close proximity to where this body was discovered.
Thank you.
We were able to identify various information that led to probable cause to get a search warrant.
With Jeremy being the last person seen with Clark, we were really searching Jeremy's address. It just happened to be owned by his dad. Jeremy was not at home at the time.
I participated in the search warrant of Jeremy Leininger's home.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Detective Gladson.
When law enforcement arrived to Joel and Karen's house, Karen was told it was regarding Clark missing.
What do you mean he's missing?
Karen knew Clark from the ranch, but Karen didn't know that Clark was found with 2 bullet holes in him and presumed to have been murdered.
My husband told me that he moved to California.
California.
Gladson's thought was, unless California is in the middle of the Cowie River, He didn't move to California. He also wonders, why would her husband, Joel, tell her he just moved away?
Oh, well, I'm sorry to tell you he's not in California. We found his body down by the river.
You could see on her face, her demeanor was thinking, well, how can that be?
They inform her they have a search warrant for the premises, and they're searching for a handgun.
Step aside, please, ma'am.
At the time they were executing the search warrant, they hear Karen, his wife, call Joel and say, your buddies from Thurston County are here.
She obviously was not happy for us being there.
Your ass off my property. Please calm down, sir.
While I was searching the inside of the Leininger home, I heard a loud commotion and somebody screaming out towards the driveway.
What the hell's going on here? Trespass!
Joel comes rolling into his property.
And here is Joel going out of his mind, ordering the police out of his home. They have no right.
Get your ass off my property. Wait right there. You got no right to be here.
When a detective went over and explained to him that we had a search warrant for the property, he got very angry.
You wonder, why would somebody do that? What are you afraid we're going to find in this house?
Get the hell away from me.
The deputy grabbed a hold of Joel Leininger's wrist, trying to detain him, and the struggle ensued.
Trespassing! Hey, get the hell away from me. Don't you touch me.
People believe they know their rights. I will assure you that no one knows their rights unless they went to law school.
Sir, I'm placing you under arrest for obstruction of justice.
A search warrant's been issued for the premise. It is the order of the court. It doesn't matter what you think or what you believe. It takes 5 deputies to control him and put him in a police car.
After Joel Leininger was detained, we continued with the search of his residence.
If you have somebody that's cooperating with a search warrant, well, they don't have anything to hide, but generally folks that are worried are the ones that react negatively when law enforcement's present at their home.
Hey, detective, come check this out.
We searched and found an empty holster that had a magazine with it. That magazine contained .45 caliber ammunition consistent with the .45 caliber round that was removed from Clark Calhoun.
So what was in that holster is most likely the murder weapon. They ask the wife, Karen, whose bedroom is this, assuming she's going to say it's Jeremy's bedroom.
Whose room is this?
Joel's.
This is Joel's room.
Yeah. We don't sleep together.
That raises an eyebrow. So this is Joel's bedroom, and there's this empty holster. And now we have Joel outside the house going absolutely out of his mind that they're searching the place.
That kind of raises flags where now are we looking at Joel as the person that killed Clark?
It doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to decide that there's something here. So they bring Joel in to the sheriff's department because he's in custody, and he has calmed down to some degree.
It's a complete waste of time. I don't even know why you have me down here.
Gladson explains that they have found Mr. Calhoun. He is a victim of a homicide.
Well, the problem is Clark Calhoun was shot with a .45.
Here we got a similar type holster inside his residence that he would have access to, no gun.
So how do you explain that, Joel?
I haven't seen that gun in months. I reported missing back in September.
We searched and found a record of Leininger reporting his .45 caliber handgun as missing in September of 2016.
When Joel was arrested, it was strictly for the obstruction of justice and resisting arrest. So we didn't have any factual information to be able to do anything in regards to detaining or charging Joel with any crime. All we had was what we called skinny evidence.
I'm loose.
Joel posted bail immediately for obstructing a law enforcement officer and resisting arrest, and then was released.
Joel now could be our primary suspect, but all we had was a lot of circumstantial evidence. So we still haven't identified who killed Clark. It could be anybody at this point.
In a murder case, you're investigating total darkness. You're punching in the dark. You want somebody to say, ouch. If somebody says, ouch, then you shine a light. So as you learn more about the dynamics and more about the personalities, then you go back and re-interview people from a different perspective. Elkins decides to re-interview Randy, the friend who was in the car when Clark and Inman and Randy were gonna go shopping.
Hey, Randy.
Hey, what can I do for you?
This time, Elkins is armed with more facts.
You happen to remember anything strange leading up to the days before Clark's disappearance?
Well, now that you mention it, yeah, the other night.
How about that?
Randy shared that before Clark went missing, he was with Jeremy and a friend of his identified as Tyler.
Randy goes on to report that Tyler was talking about burying dead cows on the property. Ranchers find a place where they can just dig a hole and drop the cow in.
Then, I don't know, Tyler kind of got a little weird. I remember Tyler saying,
"You could probably bury a body out there too. Nobody would ever know."
Well, that's a pretty interesting conversation 2 days before Mr. Calhoun goes missing and winds up murdered. Now, he wasn't in a grave, but dead he was.
He actually said those words.
Yes, sir.
We're wondering now, maybe Tyler had some direct involvement in regards to the murder of Clark.
So Elkins has to talk to Tyler Frazier. What about this conversation you had at this party?
What I'm trying to do, Tyler, is find out exactly what happened to Clark Calhoun.
We interviewed Tyler at his residence.
I don't know what happened to the dude.
But you work with him on the ranch.
Yeah, sometimes.
He indicated he did know Clark, that he was friends with Jeremy, and that he would occasionally work on the property in Rainier, but denied any involvement or any knowledge of what we were talking about.
Tyler says he was with his girlfriend and never left his place the day that Calhoun went missing.
You don't recall having a conversation with Jeremy about burying a body on the ranch?
What? That wasn't me.
He indicated that the conversations were between Randy and Jeremy.
You know, you'd probably bury a body out there, too. Nobody'd ever know.
You're crazy, man.
Man, I'm telling you.
Tyler says some map was brought out, and they were actually comparing locations on that property where something could be buried.
So Elkins, after talking to Frazier, realizes that Randy lied to him, directly and thoughtfully lied. That he was having that conversation about burying dead things and not Mr. Frazier.
So when someone does that, it makes you think as an investigator that they're trying to hide something.
In fact, lying is always a bad thing. Why would you lie to me? What else are you lying to me about? Elkins is preparing to summon Randy for another interview when Randy shows up in his office. When it comes to murder, best friends are meaningless.
I'm a little surprised you wanted to see me, Randy.
Yeah, well, I got something I gotta get off my chest.
Oh. Elkins likes it when somebody has to get something off their chest. I always did as well. Guilt is a terrible thing. For the police, an extremely useful thing.
I told you that Clark and Jeremy, they didn't have any problems with each other. Well, that wasn't entirely true.
Randy directly and specifically lied to Elkins because he was afraid he'd lose his job, he'd lose what little life he had if he ratted off the owner's son.
Randy shared with us that Jeremy flat out did not like, possibly hated Clark for many reasons. Jeremy pretty much felt that Clark was taking advantage of his uncle and that he was basically living on the property for free, not having to pay for anything.
Toss the smoke and help us out, okay? All right, do something.
Jeremy was convinced that Clark was a freeloader, lazy. Clark refused to work around the ranch, on and on and on.
Randy emphasized that this negative relationship between the both of them had been going on for quite a while.
And right before Clark went missing, Jeremy, he just going on and on about how Clark stole money from him.
He goes on to say that Jeremy was more than angry. Jeremy was wild about the missing money from his truck. Jeremy was convinced that Clark is the one who stole it.
Did he? I don't know.
We never did identify for sure if Clark stole any money from Jeremy.
Jeremy is convincing himself of all the reasons why Clark should not be permitted to live on this planet, most of which are invented.
I had a few questions to Jeremy.
Once Randy shared this with us, we tried to talk to Jeremy another time. He declined to provide any statements and requested a lawyer, so we couldn't ask him any more questions.
People run from the police. They climb. They're like animals. Where are you going? Stairway to Heaven is a song. There is no escape.
We had all circumstantial evidence. The problem is that may not be enough to establish probable cause to arrest and get a conviction. We needed something concrete. Shortly thereafter, Detective Gladson had phoned me and indicated that two people had come forth and had some information about the involvement of Jeremy.
The two people were tenants of Joe Leininger. They lived on the same property, and they were friends with Jeremy Leininger.
So what's going on with Jeremy?
We decided to split them up, and Detective Gladson interviewed the male witness, and I interviewed a female witness.
We had a party up at our house that Friday. I just knew I was like hearing stuff that I didn't want to hear or believe. Jeremy was crying, he was sulking.
Then Jeremy told me what he did.
Which is what?
He shot him.
A direct confession to murder. Secrets don't stay secrets. People suffer from diarrhea of the mouth. They always have, and they always will.
And it's getting you excited because now you got witnesses that Jeremy conversed with and told them that he killed Clark.
Is it enough to arrest him? Not really. But Elkins has another card up his sleeve. He gets a warrant for Jeremy's cell phone records.
Big Brother is real. Your phone is never off. And so if you keep your phone on you, we'll find you. It's that simple.
Elkins gets telephone records, and what does he discover? Jeremy's phone moves between all the points required, to include the ranch and the site where the body is dumped.
Also, we were able to ping the towers. And one of the things that the ping showed was that Jeremy stopped at a friend's house, and that friend was identified as John Perry.
He's at John's house for approximately 20 minutes before the two head back north to the Rainier property. I say both of them because their phone records mirrored each other.
Both phones are together and go exactly through the ranch, and then are found going out Rose Valley, which is out towards the river in Cowlitz County.
Yeah, they probably should leave their phone at home. Unfortunately, most criminals aren't very swift. So now we were looking at John Perry as the co-conspirator at minimum.
Elkins needs to put Jeremy over his head, and the way to do that is to talk to Mr. Perry. Mr. Perry is going to have some information that's going to crucify Jeremy. Elkins has the same group of players he's had from the beginning, but it's finally starting to straighten out Jeremy Leninger is most likely the person responsible. He might have had a helper, and his name is John Perry.
John Perry was the last piece that we needed because, everything else was hearsay and circumstantial. And John Perry, he was there.
I located John at an apartment complex in Longview, Washington.
Mr. Perry, I'm here to speak with you about Jeremy Leninger and the murder of Clark Calhoun.
Yeah? Perry initially says, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know anything about that.
All right. Just come out here. We're going to take you in for questioning.
He denied a lot of things, but we had enough to arrest him for that crime as being a co-conspirator of a homicide.
He was booked in the Thurston County Jail on $250,000 bail. He knew he was facing significant time.
All right, I am Detective Elkins, Thurston County Sheriff's Office. My understanding is you wanted to provide a statement regarding the incident where Clark Calhoun was murdered.
Yes. I know I don't want to be a part of this because I wasn't a part of this. I didn't have no choice in this. I'm not doing someone else's time.
Okay, makes sense.
And Mr. Perry says, let me tell you what I know. Please do.
And that was when the case blew open.
So let's start from the beginning. Okay, you ready to start?
Yes.
He had indicated exactly what his involvement was and what transpired. At some point in time, Jeremy was fed up. He was done with Clark.
Jeremy is the person with the smallest motive in the world. He doesn't like Clark. That turns into hating Clark. That turns into an overwhelming desire to kill him. So what does Jeremy do? He needs the means to get rid of Clark. Well, his dad's got the means, a .45 automatic. And eventually he gets enough nerve to use it.
Hey, Clark.
Yeah.
There's a hole in the fence over on the northeast side of the ranch. Think I get a little hand fixing it, please?
Sure thing, Jeremy.
Clark Calhoun walks into a death trap without knowing it.
Thanks for your help, Clark. Want to come smoke some weed with my buddy John and I real quick?
Yeah, I'm always down for that.
Hop in.
I was at my house, chilling in my bed. Jeremy, he sent me a text saying that he needs help with problems, someone stole money. I thought he's just gonna come pick me up and then we're gonna go beat someone's ass and get his money back.
What happened next?
Jumped into the back of his truck.
In the back bed of the truck? Or
No, like in the back seat.
was anybody else with him?
There was a dude in the passenger seat.
Okay, who was that?
That was Clark.
Clark who?
I don't know his name. I thought it was one of his buddies.
Okay, had you ever met this guy before?
I met him once when I was up at his family's property. We were having a family gathering.
Okay, was anybody else there?
No. It's just me, Jeremy, and Clark.
What was the interaction between Jeremy and Clark and yourself?
They didn't really talk at all. Like, he just seemed agitated.
Who did?
Jeremy.
In what way? What do you mean?
He wasn't really talking. He just seemed pissed off. We just kept on driving, and then he stops, And then he's like, everyone get out and the smoke a bowl weed. We jump out, we go to the back of the truck. And then Jeremy told me to go back in the truck and grab the weed.
So Clark, missing some money, you take it?
Not this again.
Then all of a sudden, I heard 4 gunshots. Boom, 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 boom.
And when he turned, Clark was on the ground and Jeremy was holding a gun.
Then I jumped back out. I was like, what the did you just do? And I looked down and he's just lifeless. Nothing at all.
Okay, then what happened?
I looked at Jeremy. He had a crazy look on his face.
What did you do? Help me pick this guy up, will you? No, no.
I was like, I don't want no part of this. I'm not gonna pick up that body. So he grabbed the rope and tarp from the back of the truck, tied his legs, and he tied it to the back of his truck. And then he started driving through the woods.
So he drugged the body to an area of the farm where they had a backhoe that he was able to lift Clark's body in the bucket of the backhoe and then deposit him in the back of his truck.
They went southbound on I-5. They proceeded down to Cowweeman River.
He jumps in the back of the truck, pulls the dude by his legs, and then dude drops from the back of the truck to the ground, and he just rolled him to the side, and then he just hucks him off the side.
Jeremy believes no one will ever know what happened to Clark. Oh, I don't think so.
What happened to the gun?
I don't know about that.
Jeremy told people he melted the gun down. We never found the weapon.
No ballistics, none of that. But we have the statement of a helper. We have all the other circumstances that go with it.
All this information was more than enough to establish that probable cause, where the prosecutor agreed, yes, we now have probable cause to arrest Jeremy. He was arrested in Cowlitz County. He was transported to Thurston County, where he was booked in our jail, and at no time did he cooperate with law enforcement.
The result of that is that he is convicted of the crime of murder and received a sentence of 18 years in the Washington State Penitentiary for his crime. John Perry pleads guilty and is sentenced to 12 months in prison.
As far as a lot of the details in how my brother was murdered, I really tried to distance myself with a lot of that because at that point, there's nothing I can do to change what had happened. My brother's not coming back.
Nobody deserves to die that way. My dad, he was just kind and gentle and a teddy bear.
I know my dad's in heaven, and I know he's watching me and my kids. And I know he knows that I love him deeply. But I wish I would have had the opportunity to tell him that at one point in my life.
I do wish I could convey to my father where we are now as a family, that we're okay, that through this tragedy, we've been made stronger. I'm incredibly grateful for Detective Elkins and the personal attention that he gave to our family.
Nobody wants to have a family member murdered, but to have someone held accountable, it's nice because they're able to have closure. So it was rewarding for me as a detective because I truly believe Jeremy was evil.
Elkins stood in Calhoun's shoes because he couldn't anymore. He became his voice, like all homicide detectives all over this country every day. There was a poem written once about it. It says, I have been where you fear to be. I have gone where you fear to go. I have seen things you don't wish to see. All these things I've done for you.
The rain started before they found her. Not a storm, not thunder, just a thin, needling drizzle that turned the red Texas dirt into rust-colored paste and blurred the tire tracks that might have meant something. It was 5:42 a.m. when the ranch hand saw what he first thought was a bundle of discarded clothes near the fence line. By 6:03, the first deputy was kneeling in wet grass, hat in hand, staring at a young woman whose name would soon echo across every local news station in 3 counties. By noon, the phrase Texas 1998 cold case had not yet been spoken, but the silence around her body already felt permanent. Her name was Emily Carter, 23, waitress at a roadside diner off Highway 281. Known for refilling coffee before you asked. Known for laughing too loud at bad jokes. Known for driving a pale blue 92 Corolla with a cracked taillight that she kept meaning to fix. On the night she vanished, she closed her shift at 10:17 p.m., counted tips under flickering fluorescent light, and told her coworker she'd see her tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. The parking lot camera didn't work. It hadn't worked in months. The owner kept meaning to fix it. Witnesses later said they saw a dark pickup idling near the exit. No plates remembered. No driver clearly seen. Just an engine running too long, headlights off, waiting. By midnight, Emily's mother had called her cell phone 3 times. Straight to voicemail. By 1:12 a.m., she was driving the route herself, scanning shoulders of the highway, stomach tight with a dread that mothers recognize before logic does. At 2:40 a.m., she filed the missing person report. And then morning came. And with it, the ranch hand, the fence line, the drizzle. The crime scene was both chaotic and eerily untouched. No sign of struggle in the grass. No defensive wounds obvious at first glance. Her purse was missing. Her car was gone. There were faint bruises along her wrists. Dirt under her nails. A thin ligature mark, barely visible beneath strands of rain plaster hair. The medical examiner would later confirm strangulation. Clean. Controlled. Personal. The community reacted the way small Texas communities do. They gathered. They whispered. They watched the sky, as if answers might fall from it. Volunteers formed search lines for the missing car. Churches held vigils that smelled of melted wax and wet denim. The sheriff stood before cameras and said all the right words. Active investigation, no immediate suspects, asking for public assistance. But behind closed doors, the tone was different. There were no signs of sexual assault. No robbery evident beyond the missing purse. No immediate motive. Just a young woman placed carefully near a boundary fence, as if discarded, but not quite hidden. Almost like a message. Or a mistake. 3 days later, her Corolla was found abandoned behind a shuttered feed store 20 miles south. Wiped clean. Steering wheel, gear shift, door handles clean. Too clean. The kind of clean that feels loud. The lab lifted partial fibers from the back seat. A single blonde hair that did not belong to Emily. And beneath her fingernails, microscopic skin cells. Invisible in 1998 to the tools most departments had readily available. Collected. Bagged. Logged. And then the waiting began. Interviews rolled out in waves. Coworkers. Ex-boyfriends. Regular customers at the diner. A traveling salesman who paid in cash and stared too long. A mechanic who once offered to fix her tail light for free. A married man rumored to be texting her late at night. Alibis stacked up like bricks. None cracked. The dark pickup became legend. Tips poured in. Hundreds. A neighbor's cousin's friend who drove something similar. A drifter passing through town. A rancher's estranged son. Each lead chased. Each lead collapsing into nothing solid. Weeks turned to months. The drizzle became summer heat. News fans left. Headlines shrank from front page to column inch. The phrase cold case began to surface in murmurs, then in print. Texas 1998 cold case. Unsolved. Community shaken. Killers still out there. The sheriff aged faster that year. Evidence sat boxed in climate-controlled storage. Fibers cataloged. Hair sealed. Nail scrapings preserved in sterile envelopes marked with case number 98-0417. Detectives rotated. Budget shifted. Priorities changed. New crimes demanded attention. Emily's file thickened, but answers thinned. Her mother kept her room untouched. Bed made. Closet closed. A calendar still hanging open to April 1998. 5 years passed. Then 10. DNA technology evolved in labs far from that red dirt fence line. Techniques sharpened. Databases expanded. Cold case units formed across the country, chasing ghosts with science that hadn't existed when those ghosts were made. Names once lost resurfaced through microscopic traces. Skin cells became witnesses. A single hair could speak. In 2013, a young investigator named Daniel Ruiz reopened Box 98-0417. He wasn't there in '98. He didn't attend the funeral. He didn't stand in the drizzle. But he read every page like it had happened yesterday. He saw the blonde hair, the preserved nail scrapings, the partial fibers. And he saw something else, opportunity. He sent the samples to a private lab specializing in advanced DNA amplification. The process was delicate, risky, expensive. Years earlier, the material would have been too degraded. Now there was a chance, a slim, flickering chance. Weeks later, the call came. Partial profile obtained. Not enough for immediate identification, but enough to enter into Cody's. Enough to wait for a match. And then the waiting returned. Different year. Same silence. Until 2017. A routine felony arrest in another Texas county triggered a DNA submission. Standard procedure.
Swab.
Upload.
Compare.
The system blinked. Partial match. Not direct. Familial. Investigators stared at the screen. A possible relative.
Male.
Connected to a name no one in Emily's town had ever seriously suspected. A name that had floated briefly in early interviews and drifted away. A mechanic. Quiet. Polite. Had offered to fix her tail light once. His name was Thomas Grady. In 1998, he had an alibi. Said he was home alone watching television. No one to confirm. No one to contradict. He had voluntarily given a statement.
Calm.
Cooperative. Forgettable. But now the science was louder than memory. Detectives reopened doors long closed. Neighbors older now. Co-workers scattered. They learned Grady had moved counties 2 years after Emily's death. Married. Divorced. Minor assault charge in 2009. Nothing that screamed killer. Everything that whispered something unfinished. Surveillance began quietly. Trash pull authorized. A discarded coffee cup retrieved from outside a hardware store.
Sent to the lab.
The comparison was clinical, unemotional. Sequence against sequence. Marker against marker. Match. Not partial. Not familial.
Direct.
The room, they would later say, went completely still. 19 years after the drizzle. 19 years after the fence line. 19 years of a mother staring at an April calendar that never turned. Texas 1998 cold case solved. DNA breakthrough stuns investigators. But the story didn't feel solved yet. Because arrest is not confession. Match is not motive. Science answers who.
It rarely answers why.
When they brought Thomas Grady in for questioning, he looked smaller than in the old photographs.
Thinner.
Hair receding. Eyes calculating. He asked for water. He asked what this was about. And when they said Emily Carter's name, something flickered, just for a second, before composure returned. He denied everything. Said he barely knew her. Said lots of people came through that diner. Said offering to fix a tail light wasn't a crime. Detectives placed the lab report on the table. Pages of numbers. Indisputable patterns. His DNA under her fingernails. Silence expanded between them. Outside, cameras gathered again. Reporters revived archival footage. Cold case breakthrough. Justice after 19 years. Community stunned. The phrases rolled easily off anchors' tongues. Inside the interrogation room, the air felt heavier. Because DNA can place you at a struggle. It cannot explain what happened in the moments before it. It cannot describe the look in her eyes. And it cannot erase 19 years of absence. He kept denying. And somewhere in Texas, a mother held a phone, listening to a detective tell her that science had finally spoken. The drizzle had long since dried. But the echo of that morning had never truly faded. He keeps saying he doesn't remember. That's the first thing that strikes the detectives as the interrogation clock ticks past its second hour. Thomas Grady doesn't rage, doesn't break, doesn't even sweat the way guilty men often do. He shrugs. He leans back. He says maybe he bumped into her at the diner, maybe she scratched him accidentally, maybe DNA transfers in strange ways. He speaks as if this is a misunderstanding at a grocery store, not a 19-year-old ghost clawing its way out of the ground. The lab report sits between them like a loaded weapon. His DNA beneath her fingernails. A violent contact. A struggle. Science doesn't guess. Science doesn't misremember. It doesn't care about alibis built on empty living rooms and late-night television. It reads cells like confessions written in flesh. Outside, word spreads fast. Texas 1998 cold case solved. DNA breakthrough stuns investigators. The headline rolls across local stations before the sun sets. The same anchors who once reported her disappearance now stand older, grayer, repeating her name with a gravity sharpened by time. Emily Carter, 23, waitress.
Daughter.
Frozen in youth while the world aged around her. In the interrogation room, the detectives shift tactics. They don't accuse. They don't shout. They lay out a timeline like bricks in a wall he cannot climb over. April 17, 1998. 10:17 p.m., she clocks out. Witness sees a dark pickup near the exit. You owned a dark pickup then, Mr. Grady. Registration records confirm it. You lived 8 miles from the diner. You admitted you stopped there twice a week. You offered to fix her tail light. You knew she drove alone. He stares at the table. Fingers interlocked. A muscle in his jaw pulses once. They slide a photograph across the surface. Not the crime scene. Not yet. Just her smiling in her diner uniform, coffee pot tilted mid-pour, eyes bright. They watch him watch her. They wait for something human to surface. Nothing. He says he wants a lawyer. The request is calm, controlled, final. Procedure takes over. The interview ends. The cuffs click shut with a metallic certainty that feels almost anticlimactic. 19 years of waiting, and it comes down to the quiet snap of steel around bone. Booking photos circulate within hours. The town splits between disbelief and grim confirmation. He seemed normal. He fixed my brakes once. He always waved. Normal becomes a word that tastes bitter. Because normal is what walked among them while Emily's case gathered dust in a box marked 98-0417. Detective Daniel Ruiz doesn't celebrate. He stands in evidence storage later that night, staring at the original envelopes. The blonde hair, the fibers, the nail scrapings that waited nearly 2 decades to speak. He thinks about timing, about how justice is sometimes just technology catching up to cruelty. But even with the arrest, something unsettles him. There is no clear motive, no history of obsession, no stalking reports, no love letters turned threatening, no financial desperation, just proximity, opportunity, and now DNA. The prosecution builds its case carefully. They reconstruct the final hour of her life through fragments. Phone records show no outgoing calls after 10:22 p.m. Traffic cameras along Highway 281 captured a dark pickup matching his vehicle's model heading south minutes after she left work. Grainy, indistinct, but aligned. Forensics re-examines the fibers found in the back seat of her abandoned Corolla. Advanced microscopy links them to a brand of industrial seat covers sold locally in the late 90s. Grady purchased a set in 1997. Receipts long gone, but a former coworker remembers helping him install them. Memory becomes another kind of evidence, fragile, imperfect, but pointed. The medical examiner revisits the autopsy with modern eyes. The ligature mark suggests a cord, narrow and synthetic. Detectives search Grady's old property records and learn he once worked part-time hauling equipment, using nylon utility rope common on ranch jobs. It's circumstantial. It's contextual. It's not the rope itself. That was never found. Meanwhile, Emily's mother sits in a courtroom for the first pretrial hearing, hands folded so tightly her knuckles pale. She has waited 19 years for this room to fill. 19 years of birthdays without candles, of Thanksgivings with an empty chair that no one dared remove. Closure is a word reporters use. She does not. She calls it oxygen. She says she has been holding her breath since 1998. Grady maintains his plea. Not guilty. His defense challenges the DNA chain of custody, suggests contamination, argues secondary transfer. They paint out wherever space allows. Because all it takes is one juror uncertain about microscopic evidence to fracture a case built on cells and silence. Detectives revisit old witness statements, hunting for anything missed. One line from 1998 resurfaces. A teenage gas station clerk reported seeing a blue Corolla stopped briefly on a frontage road, hazard lights blinking, a man standing near the driver's side window. At the time, it was dismissed. Too vague. Too late. Now, investigators re-interview him. He's in his late 30s. Memory faded but not gone. He recalls the man being taller than the driver. Broad-shouldered.
Dark baseball cap.
He cannot identify Grady definitively, but the description does not exclude him. The community replays every interaction they ever had with the accused. Every smile feels counterfeit in hindsight. Parents talk to their children about trust, about strangers who aren't strangers at all. Old fears resurface. If he did this, could there have been others? Unreported incidents. Close calls. Unnamed girls who made it home safely without knowing how near they came to becoming headlines. Investigators quietly check unsolved cases in neighboring counties from the late 90s. Patterns. Similarities. Isolated roads. Young women alone at night. Nothing definitive emerges, but the question lingers like humidity before a storm. In jailhouse calls monitored by authorities, Grady speaks cautiously. He tells a relative he's being framed by bad science. He says small towns need villains. He says he'll fight. He never says her name. As trial preparations intensify, Ruiz returns to the original crime scene. The fence line looks smaller now. The ranch has new ownership. The grass grows thicker. But standing there at dawn, he imagines the drizzle again, the first deputy kneeling, the sense that something irreversible had happened. He wonders what passed through Grady's mind in those final seconds in 1998. Rage? Panic? Calculation? Or was it emptiness? Courtroom proceedings begin under harsh fluorescent light that exposes every wrinkle time has carved. The prosecution opens with a simple statement: DNA does not forget. 19 years later, it remembered. They walk jurors through amplification processes, allele markers, statistical probabilities so astronomical they border on abstract. 1 in billions. Practically impossible to belong to anyone else. The defense counters with possibility. With laboratory error rates. With human mistakes in evidence storage. They remind jurors that there were no eyewitnesses. No confession. No murder weapon. They ask whether science alone, divorced from narrative certainty, is enough to condemn a man for life. Emily's mother listens to experts debate her daughter's fingernails as if they are academic exhibits. She closes her eyes when autopsy photos flash briefly on monitors. The ligature mark. The bruises along wrists.
Clean.
Controlled. Personal. Weeks stretch. Then the moment arrives. Grady takes the stand. He looks smaller than ever under oath. He says he was home alone. Says he might have shaken her hand once. Says maybe she scratched him playfully at the diner. A weak smile attempts to soften the suggestion. It falls flat in the silent room. The prosecutor steps closer. Mr. Grady, can you explain how your DNA was found beneath the fingernails of a woman who died fighting for her life? A pause. He swallows.
No.
The word hangs thin and fragile. Jurors exchange glances. The air thickens. Outside the courthouse, cameras broadcast live updates. Cold case trial grips Texas. Family awaits verdict. The town that once whispered now watches openly, breath collectively held. Deliberations begin. Hours pass. Evening settles. When the jury files back in, every chair creaks louder than it should.
The foreperson stands.
Voice steady. Verdict. Guilty. A sound escapes from Emily's mother, half sob, half exhale. 19 years of suspended breath released in one fractured moment. Thomas Grady shows no visible reaction as the sentence is read. Life imprisonment. Reporters call it justice. They call it closure. They call it a triumph of modern forensics over time's erosion. Texas 1998 cold case solved. DNA breakthrough stuns investigators. But as the courtroom empties and the headlines cycle, something remains unsettled in the quiet spaces between facts. Because motive was never fully illuminated. Because the rope was never found. Because the exact path from diner parking lot to fence line still exists only in theory. Ruiz understands that some mysteries shrink under conviction but never vanish entirely. The law answered who. It imposed consequence. It closed the file. Yet on certain mornings, when rain falls thin and needling over red Texas dirt, he remembers that first image, the ranch hand mistaking a body for discarded clothes, and he knows that even solved cases carry shadows. Emily Carter's room was finally packed up the week after sentencing. The April 1998 calendar removed from the wall.
The bed stripped.
The door left open. Outside, life in the town resumes its ordinary rhythm. Coffee refilled. Tail lights fixed. Pickups idling at intersections. And somewhere behind concrete walls, a man who said he doesn't remember lives with a memory science refused to let him erase. The prison intake photograph captures him under flat, unforgiving light, but it's the eyes that investigators study later, still calm, still measuring, still withholding. Thomas Grady disappears behind concrete and razor wire, processed into a system built for men with numbers instead of names. Yet outside those walls, the echo of Emily Carter's death refuses to settle into the neat finality the verdict suggests. Because conviction is not the same as understanding, and in the weeks after sentencing, details once peripheral begin to feel louder, sharper, almost accusatory. Letters start arriving at the sheriff's office. Anonymous envelopes with no return address. One claims Grady bragged in the early 2000s about getting away with something big. Another insists he once showed up at a party with scratches on his hands, laughing them off as barbed wire cuts. None of it surfaced during trial. None of it was solid enough to enter evidence. But now that the town has a villain, memories rearrange themselves around him like iron filings to a magnet. Detective Daniel Ruiz reads every letter. He tells himself it's routine. Post-conviction review. Due diligence. But part of him is chasing something else, an answer that DNA could not provide.
The why.
He replays the interrogation footage alone one night in his office. Grady's face when Emily's name is spoken. That flicker. Not fear. Not shock. Recognition layered with something colder. Ruiz pauses the video at that exact frame.
Zooms in.
There is no remorse visible. No spike of grief. Just calculation interrupted. The case file, once dormant, now grows again. Not with evidence of innocence, but with lingering questions. Investigators map Grady's movements in 1998 more precisely than ever before. Employment logs. Fuel purchases. Bank withdrawals. They reconstruct a pattern. Diner visits on Fridays. Extended stays in the parking lot. Small talk that edged toward familiarity, but never quite crossed into friendship. A former coworker of Emily's comes forward after the trial, voice shaking in a recorded interview. She recalls a night weeks before the murder when Grady lingered after closing, asking Emily if she ever got scared driving home alone. At the time, it sounded like awkward flirting. Now it lands like reconnaissance. The prosecution had focused on physical evidence. They had to. It was the strongest pillar. But motive, thin as it was, may have been rooted in obsession so subtle no one recognized it while it was forming. Ruiz requests prison correspondence records. Within months of incarceration, Grady begins receiving letters from strangers, women drawn to notoriety, to danger sanitized by distance. He replies to some. His tone in those letters is controlled, almost rehearsed. He calls himself misunderstood, claims he was convicted by numbers on a page. He never once describes Emily as a person. She is always the case. That language unsettles Ruiz more than denial ever did. Meanwhile, Emily's mother visits the grave every Sunday. The headstone, placed years before the arrest, bears dates that look too narrow to contain the weight of 19 stolen years. She speaks aloud sometimes, updating her daughter on the trial, on the verdict, on how the town reacted. She says they found him. She says he can't hurt anyone else. She never says she understands why. In the months following sentencing, a reporter uncovers an overlooked 1996 complaint filed in a neighboring county. A young woman reported being followed from a grocery store to her driveway by a dark pickup. The driver never approached her, just watched. The vehicle description matches Grady's old truck model. The case went nowhere. No plate number. No suspect identified. It is impossible to prove connection now. But the pattern chills. Ruiz drives to that county anyway. He interviews the woman, now in her 40s. She describes the fear with clarity that time hasn't dulled. The sense of being measured, evaluated, chosen or spared by a stranger's decision. When shown a photo lineup that includes Grady, she hesitates. Says she can't be certain. 19 years warp memory. Still, she admits the eyes feel familiar. Back in Texas, a forensic psychologist reviews Grady's background at Ruiz's request. Childhood unremarkable. No documented abuse. No criminal record beyond minor incidents. The psychologist notes traits: narcissistic tendencies, emotional detachment, need for control. The strangulation method aligns with intimacy-driven homicide.
Close. Hands-on.
Personal.
Control.
That word loops in Ruiz's thoughts. Emily had been independent, drove herself home, worked late shifts. Friendly but firm, according to coworkers. She once turned down a customer who asked for her number, laughed it off publicly, told friends privately that some men mistake kindness for invitation. Was Grady one of them? There is no diary entry confirming fear. No recorded complaint naming him. Only fragments that, when placed together, suggest fixation simmering quietly beneath ordinary interaction. A year after conviction, Grady files an appeal. Standard process. Claims ineffective counsel. Questions DNA handling. The appeals court reviews transcripts, lab procedures, chain of custody documentation that Ruiz guarded meticulously. The conviction stands. Headlines flare briefly again. Appeal denied in Texas 1998 cold case. Then fade. Time resumes its forward motion. Yet something unexpected happens during a routine prison interview conducted by a journalist granted limited access. Asked whether he thinks about Emily, Grady responds, "People think they know what happened. They don't." The statement is vague, ambiguous, but it ignites speculation like dry grass under a match. Ruiz watches the clip repeatedly. What don't they know? He files a request to re-interview Grady under post-conviction review. Permission granted, narrowly. The meeting room inside the prison is sterile, fluorescent lit, echoing with distant metallic clangs. Grady enters in standard-issue uniform, sits without being told. Older now, lines deeper, but the composure remains intact. Ruiz does not start with accusations. He starts with silence. Minutes stretch. Then he asks quietly, "What don't we know?" Grady smiles faintly, as if indulging a child.
"You build a story," he says.
"You needed it to make sense." "It does make sense," Ruiz replies. "Your DNA was under her fingernails." "DNA says I was there," Grady answers. It doesn't say how it started. The implication hovers, suggesting consent, suggesting mutual contact turned tragic. A narrative unproven, unsupported by evidence, but strategically poisonous. Ruiz leans forward. She had defensive wounds. Grady shrugs. People scratch during arguments. Arguments about what? Silence again. Then, you tell me. You're the one who wrote the script. It's a calculated refusal. An attempt to fracture certainty without offering truth. Ruiz leaves the prison unsettled, not because he doubts the conviction, but because he senses the possibility of withheld detail, an emotional trigger, a conversation in that parking lot, a rejection that escalated into rage. The missing minutes between 10:17 p.m. and the moment her car was found abandoned remain dark. Back at the original diner site, now renovated, repainted under new management, Ruiz stands near where the broken camera once hung uselessly. He imagines the dark pickup idling, the headlights off, the engine low, Emily walking toward her Corolla, keys in hand. Did he approach casually? Did he offer help again with the taillight? Did she hesitate? Did she recognize danger too late? There are no recordings, no surviving witnesses to that exact exchange. Only science which answered the physical question. And a man in prison who refuses to answer the human one. Years pass. Emily's case becomes a reference point in law enforcement seminars about cold case breakthroughs, DNA technology advancement, evidence preservation, patience rewarded. Her name spoken in classrooms as proof that time does not always win. But in quieter conversations, detectives admit something else. Resolution is rarely complete. A conviction closes legal doors, yet emotional corridors remain unlit. On the 20th anniversary of her death, the town holds a small memorial near the fence line. The ranch owner permits it.
Candles again.
But this time not in desperation, in remembrance. Ruiz stands at the edge of the gathering, watching Emily's mother place fresh flowers against weathered wood. A breeze moves through the grass. Someone whispers that justice was served. Maybe it was. Yet as night settles over red Texas dirt, the same thin drizzle begins to fall, the kind that blurs edges and softens footprints. Ruiz feels the old image return, a ranch hand mistaking a body for discarded clothes. The fragile distance between ordinary and irreversible. Thomas Grady will likely die behind concrete walls. Emily Carter will forever be 23. And though the headline declared the cold case solved, though DNA stunned investigators and a jury delivered its verdict, the final minutes of her life remain locked inside a mind that still measures, still withholds, still says he doesn't remember. Some mysteries shrink under fluorescent courtroom light. Others linger in the spaces science cannot reach. And in Texas, when rain falls thin and needling over rust-colored earth, the past does not feel buried at all. Years slide forward, but the case refuses to fade into archival silence. It settles instead into something heavier. Legend, warning, cautionary tale whispered to daughters before late shifts and long drives home. Emily Carter's name becomes shorthand for vulnerability in a town that once believed danger belonged elsewhere. Yet inside prison walls, Thomas Grady continues breathing, eating, sleeping, existing, as if the final chapter never quite closed. 3 years after his conviction, a retired corrections officer contacts Detective Ruiz with a detail that gnaws at him. He claims Grady avoids television when crime reports air. Not casually. Intentionally. Leaves the common room. Returns only after coverage ends. Like he doesn't want to see himself reflected, the officer says. Or maybe like he doesn't want to relive something that cameras can't fully reconstruct. Ruiz files the note. Small behavior. Possibly meaningless. But patterns often hide in the smallest habits. Then another thread surfaces. A storage unit auction in a nearby county reveals a box of old mechanic receipts bearing Grady's handwriting. Among them, tucked between invoices, is a folded napkin from the diner, Emily's Diner, dated March 1998. On it, scribbled in faint blue ink, a phone number, the last 2 digits smudged. Investigators compare it to Emily's number from that year. It matches. No record exists of her giving it to him voluntarily. No friends recall her mentioning it. Could he have taken it from a receipt? From an order pad? Or did she, in a moment of politeness or pressure, write it down to defuse the situation? The napkin becomes a silent witness, proof of contact deeper than casual small talk. When confronted again through legal channels, Grady dismisses it. Says customers exchange numbers all the time. Says maybe she wanted her car fixed. Says memory is unreliable after so long. Memory may blur, but ink on paper does not. Ruiz revisits call logs from early 1998, preserved through archived billing records obtained long after the trial. 2 late-night calls to Emily's landline from a payphone near a hardware store Grady frequented. Duration, under 30 seconds. Hang-ups. The timing aligns with nights she worked late. Harassment? Intimidation? Or coincidence stitched together by hindsight? The district attorney's office debates whether the new findings alter anything legally. They do not overturn the conviction. They do not change the sentence. But they thicken the narrative, filling in motive with darker ink. Obsession. Control. Rejection. The psychologist who once reviewed Grady's file updates her assessment. She suggests the pattern resembles escalation behavior. Fixation, surveillance, testing boundaries, then confrontation when perceived humiliation or loss of control peaks. Emily may never have known how carefully she was being observed. In prison interviews, Grady grows more guarded as media interest resurges. He declines further commentary. His earlier cryptic statement, "You built a story," circulates again, dissected by pundits who crave ambiguity. Some speculate about accomplices. Others invent elaborate conspiracies. None supported by evidence. Ruiz shuts those theories down methodically. There was no second DNA profile at the scene. No unidentified prints. No unexplained fibers. Science remains singular and precise. Still, one element continues to disturb him. The placement of the body. Careful. Near a fence line. Not deep in brush. Visible enough to be found quickly, yet not dumped recklessly. Almost deliberate. A criminologist consulted post-trial offers a theory. Offenders who feel wronged sometimes stage discovery unconsciously, wanting the body found, wanting the narrative to begin. It is not remorse. It is control over how the story unfolds. If true, that drizzle-soaked morning was not random. It was orchestrated. On the 22nd anniversary of the murder, Ruiz drives alone to the abandoned feed store lot where Emily's Corolla was discovered. The building stands hollow now, windows boarded, paint peeling under relentless Texas sun. He stands where the car once sat, wiped clean. He imagines Grady methodically erasing prints, believing he had erased himself entirely. He almost succeeded. If technology had not evolved, if evidence had not been preserved meticulously, if a single envelope had been mishandled. Cold cases survive on fragile decisions made by people who may never see the outcome. Emily's mother grows older. Her visits to the grave become slower, steadier, less frantic. She once told Ruiz that anger burned hot for years, but exhaustion eventually replaced it. What remains now is quiet sorrow and an unanswerable question she no longer asks aloud. Did she suffer long? The medical examiner's testimony suggested rapid unconsciousness under sustained pressure. Clinical. Detached. But imagination resists clinical boundaries. In prison, Grady's health begins to decline in his late 50s. Minor stroke. Partial weakness in his right hand. The same hand investigators believe tightened nylon cord 19 years earlier. Fate does not balance scales, but coincidence can feel symbolic. A chaplain assigned to his unit reports that Grady occasionally attends services, but never seeks confession. Never speaks of remorse. When asked privately if he wishes to unburden himself, he reportedly replies, "There's nothing to add." Nothing to add. As if Emily's final minutes were a footnote rather than a life extinguished. Ruiz contemplates one final attempt at truth, not for the courts, not for headlines, but for the mother who still pauses at April on every calendar. He arranges a mediated meeting, offering no legal incentives, only the opportunity to clarify history before time closes permanently. Grady agrees, surprisingly.
The room is smaller this time.
No cameras. No reporters. Just Ruiz, a legal observer, and the man whose DNA bridged 19 silent years. Ruiz does not bring photographs. He brings the napkin. He places it on the table. "You kept this," he says quietly. Grady studies it. His weakened hand trembles slightly as he touches the edge. "She gave it to me," he says at last. Ruiz holds his gaze. "Why?" A pause. Longer than before. Less calculated. "She didn't mean anything by it," Grady continues. "That was the problem." The words land like a crack in glass. "She laughed," he says, voice thinner now. "Not at me. At something else. But it felt like at me." There it is. Not a full confession. Not a detailed recounting. But a fracture in the facade. Ruiz waits. Grady's jaw tightens. "I just wanted to talk." She kept walking. And then, Ruiz presses. Silence floods the room. Heavy. Suffocating. Grady looks up, eyes suddenly sharp despite age. You already know the ending. It is the closest he has ever come to admission without crossing the line. Ruiz leaves with no signed statement, no recorded confession. Yet the motive, fragile and petty and devastatingly human, feels clearer than ever. Wounded ego. Misread kindness. A laugh taken as humiliation.
Control slipping.
Outside, the Texas sky stretches indifferent and wide. The headline once declared the cold case solved. DNA breakthrough stunned investigators. Justice delivered. But justice is rarely symmetrical. Emily's story now carries layers: science, obsession, silence, and the small, ordinary moment that may have ignited irreversible violence. A napkin. A number. A laugh misinterpreted. The town has moved forward in visible ways. New families. New businesses. Children who were not born in 1998 learn about the case in classrooms as history. Yet when drizzle falls thin over red dirt, older residents still feel a chill unrelated to weather. Because memory here is not abstract. It is anchored to a fence line, to a pale blue Corolla, to a camera that never worked. Thomas Grady will likely never articulate the full truth. Pride, shame, or control may seal it away permanently. And perhaps that is the final cruelty: knowledge partial, motive inferred, last words withheld. Emily Carter remains 23 in every photograph. Her case remains a testament to patience and persistence. And though the file is stamped closed, though the verdict stands firm, there lingers a quiet understanding among those who stood in that drizzle long ago. Some answers arrive through science, precise and undeniable. Others hover just beyond reach, carried on the thin Texas rain, forever almost spoken, never fully heard. Time does something strange to solved cases. It polishes them for textbooks, compresses them into bullet points for seminars, turns them into proof that persistence pays off. But beneath the clean narrative, DNA preserved, profile matched, suspect convicted, there remains a pulse that never fully slows. In Texas, 1998 is no longer just a year. It is a fracture line. 5 years after the verdict, the prison calls Ruiz at 2:14 a.m. Thomas Grady has collapsed in his cell. Non-fatal cardiac event. Stabilized. Transported to a medical unit under guard. Ruiz listens without visible reaction, but the call vibrates through him long after the line goes dead. Mortality changes leverage. Men who cling to silence sometimes loosen their grip when confronted with the possibility of dying unheard. By morning, media outlets are already speculating. Convicted killer hospitalized. Comment sections fill with polarized relief and resentment. Some wish him suffering. Others insist justice has already been served. The name Emily Carter trends briefly again, resurfacing like a buoy that never truly sank. Ruiz drives to the prison that afternoon. The medical wing smells sterile, metallic, detached from the world outside. Grady lies propped against thin pillows, skin sallow, eyes dulled but not vacant. Age and illness have stripped some of the hardness from his features, yet the guardedness remains intact, embedded too deeply to erode easily. You came fast, Grady murmurs. You asked to see me, Ruiz replies. A beat. I didn't. The correction is automatic. Reflexive. Ruiz doesn't challenge it. He pulls a chair closer, close enough that their voices don't carry beyond the curtain. People think a heart attack changes a man. Ruiz says quietly. Sometimes it doesn't. Grady studies him. You're hoping it does. I'm hoping you stop pretending there's nothing left to say. Silence hums between them, interrupted only by the steady electronic beep of a heart monitor. Mechanical proof of life. Of time still available. You won, Grady says finally. I'm here. Isn't that enough? Ruiz's voice remains steady. This was never about winning. Another pause. Thicker now. Grady's gaze drifts toward the ceiling. You ever think about that night? He asks. Every April. A faint exhale that might be a laugh, might be something else. She wasn't supposed to die, Grady says almost conversationally. The words hang in the sterile air, heavier than any formal confession. Ruiz doesn't interrupt. She just kept walking, Grady continues. Like I wasn't even there. A flash of something surfaces. Anger remembered, not relived. I grabbed her arm, he says. She pulled away, scratched me, called me something. What? Ruiz asks softly. Grady's jaw tightens. Doesn't matter. It matters to her mother. That lands. Not visibly, but the rhythm of the monitor shifts, beats climbing slightly before settling again. It got out of control, Grady says at last. That's all. Out of control. The phrase is small, insufficient. It attempts to shrink violence into accident. You had rope in your truck, Ruiz presses. A flicker, recognition, irritation at the accuracy. I always had rope, Grady replies. And you drove her south. He closes his eyes. Whether in memory or avoidance, Ruiz cannot tell. She wouldn't stop yelling. The admission is thin but unmistakable now. The parking lot confrontation. The forced movement. The escalation. The fence line. I didn't mean. Grady begins, then stops himself. Pride intervening even at the edge of mortality. Ruiz leans back slightly, giving space without retreating. You wiped the car, he says quietly. You thought that would erase it. I almost did. There is no triumph in his voice. Only acknowledgement. You left her where she'd be found, Ruiz continues. Grady opens his eyes again. For the first time, something raw slips through. Not remorse exactly. Not grief. Something closer to awareness of consequence. I didn't want animals getting to her, he says. The statement is jarring in its twisted logic. A fragment of humanity embedded inside brutality. The monitor continues its steady pulse. Outside the hospital wing, correctional officers move through routine shifts, unaware that inside this curtained space, the final missing pieces are surfacing not as dramatic confession, but as quiet unraveling. You could tell this officially, Ruiz says. Give her mother clarity. Grady's stare sharpens again. Walls rebuilding. And give you a cleaner ending, he replies. This isn't about headlines. It always is, Grady mutters. The moment closes. The opening narrows. He has given enough to ease his own conscience, perhaps, but not enough to grant public closure. Ruiz stands slowly. Out of control isn't an explanation, he says. It's an excuse. Grady doesn't respond. As Ruiz leaves the medical unit, the late afternoon sun feels harsh, almost invasive. The world outside the prison hums with ordinary life. Traffic, distant laughter, wind across dry fields. Normalcy persists, indifferent to the confession half-spoken behind concrete walls. Within weeks, Grady stabilizes physically. The official record notes no new statements. No formal admission. What passed between detective and prisoner remains in handwritten notes locked inside Ruiz's desk drawer. Not admissible, not recorded, but known. Emily's mother never receives a direct confession. What she receives instead is something subtler. Ruiz visits her one evening, sits at her kitchen table where an April calendar still hangs out of habit more than grief. He does not recount every word. He does not describe rope or yelling in clinical detail. He tells her only this. He admitted it wasn't an accident. Her eyes close. A long, steady breath leaves her body. Not relief. Not exactly. But a shift. For years, she says softly, I wondered if she knew him. If she trusted him. Ruiz shakes his head gently. She tried to walk away. The answer lands like truth finally settling into place. Outside, rain begins again, thin, needling drizzle over red Texas dirt. Months later, Thomas Grady suffers a second cardiac event. This one fatal. The headline is smaller than it once would have been. Convicted killer dies in custody. No dramatic flourish. No resurgence of debate. Just a line in the news cycle. But in the quiet after publication, something changes in the town's atmosphere. Not celebration. Not vengeance satisfied. Something closer to exhale. The man who measured and withheld, who insisted he didn't remember, who nearly erased himself through wiped surfaces and empty alibis, is gone. Emily Carter remains. Her grave receives fresh flowers that week. Her mother stands a little straighter. The unanswered questions have narrowed. Not eliminated, but reduced to human scale. It was never a grand conspiracy. Never a shadowy network. It was a wounded ego on a dark parking lot. A rope in a truck. A laugh misinterpreted. A moment of control seized and never released. Texas 1998 cold case solved. DNA breakthrough stunned investigators. The science prevailed. The file closed. The verdict held. And in the end, the truth did not arrive as a courtroom spectacle or a recorded confession broadcast to cameras. It arrived in a sterile hospital room, in fragments, between heart monitor beeps and fading bravado. Some mysteries end with sirens and flashing lights. Others end with a quiet acknowledgement that cruelty often grows from something painfully ordinary. On certain mornings, when drizzle settles over rust-colored earth, the fence line still stands. The grass still bends in wind. Life continues beyond it. But for those who remember, the air carries a faint echo, not of headlines, not of courtroom verdicts, but of a young woman walking away, keys in hand, choosing distance, unaware that someone behind her could not bear being left unseen. And that, more than anything, is the part that lingers. Death does not erase a man's shadow.
It only fixes its outline.
When Thomas Grady is buried in a modest cemetery 2 counties away, there are no cameras, no crowds, no speeches. A small cluster of distant relatives stands beneath a pale Texas sky that offers neither storm nor sun, just a blank, indifferent gray. The grave is lowered. Dirt falls. The sound is dull, final. And yet, for those who carried Emily Carter's name like an unanswered question for 19 years, the ending does not feel dramatic. It feels quiet, uneven, incomplete in a way that cannot be corrected. Because he is gone. And with him, any possibility of hearing the full truth in his own words. In the weeks following his death, Ruiz finds himself returning to the case file again, not out of duty, not for appeal review, not for prosecution strategy, but because silence, once again, has settled over the story. A different silence this time. Less volatile. More permanent. He rereads his notes from the hospital room. The phrases loop in ink. She wasn't supposed to die. She kept walking. It got out of control. Each line thin. Defensive.
Minimizing.
But real. He thinks about language. How killers often shrink violence into something accidental, something reactive. As if rage were weather, and not a choice. As if rope tightened itself. Across town, the diner that once glowed under flickering fluorescent light has been renovated again. New paint. Updated signage. The broken camera long replaced with a modern digital system that records everything in high resolution. The new owner knows the history, but doesn't advertise it. Customers sip coffee at booths unaware that decades earlier, a dark pickup idled just beyond the lot. Time doesn't heal places. It layers them. Emily's mother sells the house 2 years after Grady's death. Packing up her daughter's room was harder than the trial, she later tells Ruiz. Trials are public. Rooms are private. In the back of a closet, She finds an old receipt pad from the diner, a few pages torn out, edges jagged. She wonders if one of those pages was used to scribble a phone number on a napkin. She does not keep the pad. She lets it go. Letting go is not forgiveness. It is survival. The case becomes required reading in the state's cold case training program. Evidence preservation. DNA evolution. Patience across decades. Ruiz is asked to speak about it annually. He stands before rooms filled with young detectives who were children in 1998. He tells them about the drizzle, about the ranch hand, about the importance of bagging nail scrapings even when technology hasn't caught up yet. He tells them to assume science will one day see what they cannot. He does not dwell on rope or hospital confessions. But afterward, sometimes, a trainee will ask the question that never fades. Do you think he felt remorse? Ruiz always pauses before answering. I think he felt loss of control, he says finally. Remorse is something else. Years continue to accumulate. The town grows outward. New subdivisions replace open fields near the old fence line. Children ride bikes over ground that once held police tape. Memory thins in public consciousness, but remains sharp for those who stood closest to the fracture. On the 30th anniversary of Emily's death, a small plaque is installed near the edge of the ranch property with permission from its owner. It does not mention Grady's name. It does not recount trial details. It simply reads, "In memory of Emily Carter, beloved daughter, gone too soon." The simplicity feels intentional. The story behind it too heavy for bronze. Ruiz attends the installation quietly.
No media this time.
No dramatic headline revival. Just wind moving through tall grass and the faint scent of rain in distant air. He stands near the fence line one last time. He imagines the night as reconstructed through evidence and fragments. The parking lot conversation, the misread laughter, the grab at her arm, the escalation driven by pride cracking under perceived humiliation. He imagines headlights cutting through darkness, tires crunching gravel, a rope pulled from a truck bed without premeditated grandeur, just opportunistic control spiraling into irreversible violence. He has replayed it enough to know he will never see it fully. Some parts of history are sealed inside the dead. Back at his office, nearing retirement himself now, Ruiz closes box 98-0417 for what he suspects is the final time. The cardboard edges are worn from decades of handling. The evidence bags inside are still intact, labeled in careful handwriting that once belonged to deputies long since retired or buried. The blonde hair, the fibers, the scrapings that waited patiently for science to mature. He runs a finger along the lid before sealing it. The case will remain archived, not because it is unresolved, but because resolution does not erase origin. It stands as proof that time bends, but does not always break truth. Emily Carter remains 23 in photographs displayed at annual memorial dinners hosted quietly by her extended family. Her laugh frozen mid-motion, her eyes bright, unaware of the future about to close in. Thomas Grady's name fades faster. Death does that. Without appeals, without interviews, without fresh headlines, he becomes a footnote in training manuals and archived court databases. A solved cold case. A statistic in forensic advancement studies. Yet for Ruiz, and for a handful of others, the memory never compresses into bullet points. It remains sensory. The drizzle, the red dirt, the fence line, the faint ligature mark beneath rain-plastered hair, the hospital monitor beeping while a man admitted something without fully surrendering to it. In the end, the story was never about a mastermind hiding in shadows. It was about something far more ordinary, and therefore far more terrifying. A man who could not tolerate being dismissed. A moment of ego, outweighing empathy. A decision measured in seconds that echoed across decades. Texas 1998 cold case solved. DNA breakthrough stunned investigators. The headline remains accurate. But headlines flatten what lived inside it. They do not capture the mother holding her breath for 19 years. They do not capture the detective staring at an envelope of preserved cells and betting on a future lab technique that didn't yet exist. They do not capture the thin line between walking away safely and never arriving home. As retirement approaches, Ruiz drives once more past Highway 281 at dusk. Traffic hums steadily. Pickup trucks still idle at intersections. The world has not changed its rhythm. Rain begins lightly, needling across the windshield. For a brief moment, visibility blurs just like it did that morning in 1998. He slows slightly, not from fear, but from memory. Because even solved cases leave behind weather. And in Texas, when drizzle falls over rust-colored earth, the air carries something almost audible, not a scream, not a siren, not a headline. Just the faint echo of footsteps walking away, unaware they are being followed. The file is closed. The man is buried. The science has spoken. But the story remains, carried in rain, in grass bending against wind, in the quiet understanding that justice can arrive late and still never feel entirely complete. Retirement does not silence memory. It only removes the uniform. On his last official day, Daniel Ruiz clears out a desk that has held the weight of too many names. Case files boxed. Awards wrapped in newspaper. A framed photograph from a long-ago academy class placed carefully into a cardboard container that feels too small to contain a career. Box 98-0417 is not there. It remains in archives where it belongs. But its outline is etched somewhere less organized, less sealed. A younger detective shakes his hand and says, "The cold case. That was yours." Ruiz nods once. He doesn't correct him. Cases are never owned. They are carried. Outside the building, Texas air presses warm and heavy. Traffic hums past the station as it always has. Life continues in its stubborn forward motion. Yet without the daily rhythm of briefings and evidence logs, silence grows louder. And in that silence, older memories sharpen instead of fade. A month into retirement, Ruiz wakes before dawn for no reason except habit. The sky is still dark, the hour hovering near the same thin margin in which Emily's body was discovered decades earlier. He pours coffee and stands by the window as drizzle begins, soft, persistent, almost identical to that April morning in 1998. It unsettles him more now than it did then. Because back then, the future still held possibility. Now it holds only reflection. He drives, without planning to, toward Highway 281. The road feels narrower than memory insists. Development has crept closer. Subdivisions where fields once stretched open. Yet the air smells the same before rain. Metallic, expectant. The fence line still stands. The plaque installed years earlier catches faint light as morning pushes slowly across the horizon. He parks at a distance, walks through wet grass that darkens the cuffs of his jeans. There is no tape, no deputies, no urgency, just wind. He stands there longer than he means to. He thinks about the phrase that followed the case for years. Cold case. It suggests something frozen, preserved, waiting. But nothing about that file ever felt cold. It felt suspended, heated by grief, pressurized by time. Texas 1998 cold case solved. DNA breakthrough stunned investigators. He remembers the day that headline broke. Phones ringing. Reporters crowding. A sense of victory tangled with disbelief. Science had reached backward across 19 years and pointed unambiguously. It had said him. But science had not been present in the parking lot. It had not heard the tone of her voice when she laughed. It had not felt the moment pride curdled into rage. Ruiz kneels briefly near the base of the fence. Not in reverence. Not in ritual. Just proximity. He presses his palm to the damp earth. The ground holds no memory he can feel physically. But he imagines the weight of that morning, the ranch hand's confusion, the first deputy's silence, the rain-blurring potential tire tracks that would never matter because the answer would sleep in sealed envelopes for nearly 2 decades. He rises slowly. Across town, Emily's mother now lives in a smaller house near relatives. She gardens. She volunteers twice a week at a church food pantry. Grief has changed shape over the years, smoothing its sharpest edges without erasing its presence. On certain anniversaries, she still sets an extra plate at dinner out of habit she no longer tries to correct. She once told Ruiz something that returns to him now. I used to think closure was a door. Now I think it's weather. Weather. It shifts. It lingers. It revisits unexpectedly. Later that afternoon, Ruiz receives a call from a journalist researching long-term impacts of solved cold cases. She asks whether he believes justice always brings peace. He considers the question carefully. It brings accountability, he says. Peace is something else. What was missing, she presses. He glances toward a shelf in his home office where his old badge rests inside a shadow box. The full truth, he replies. It died with him. The journalist pauses. Do you think he would have ever told everything? Ruiz doesn't hesitate this time.
No.
Because Control had to find Thomas Grady from the first parking lot encounter to the final hospital conversation.
Control over approach.
Over escalation. Over silence. Even in confession, he had rationed words like currency. The rope was never recovered. The exact sequence of seconds between arm grab and strangulation remains reconstructed, not witnessed. But sometimes reconstruction is enough. That evening, rain strengthens, tapping steadily against rooftops across town. People close windows, pull cars into garages, move through ordinary routines unaware of the quiet anniversary unfolding in one retired detective's mind. Ruiz sits at his kitchen table and finally opens the notebook where he kept personal reflections during the case. He rarely rereads it. Tonight he does. Early entries brim with frustration. Leads collapsing. Witnesses contradicting themselves. Budget constraints. Doubt creeping at edges. Later entries shift tone. Measured optimism when DNA reanalysis became possible. The precise moment the lab confirmed a direct match. The single word written in bold ink across one page. Finally. Then the hospital meeting notes. Short sentences.
Controlled handwriting.
She wasn't supposed to die. Underlined once. No commentary added beneath it. He had chosen not to editorialize. He closes the notebook. The rain continues. He realizes something then, not about Grady, not about guilt or motive, but about endurance. Cold cases test not only forensic patience, but emotional stamina. They stretch across careers, across marriages, across decades of change. They ask detectives to believe in answers not yet technically possible. And sometimes, rarely, belief is rewarded. The town no longer speaks of the case in daily conversation. It surfaces only in history segments or anniversary articles. New crimes, new tragedies, new headlines have claimed attention. That is the nature of communities. They cannot live forever inside one wound. But on nights like this, when drizzle falls thin and relentless, memory seeps upward through pavement and lawn alike. Ruiz steps onto his porch despite the rain. Lets droplets soak into his shirt. The air is cool against his skin. He thinks of Emily walking toward her Corolla. Keys between fingers. A shift completed. A future still wide open. He thinks of the fragile margin between ordinary irritation and catastrophic violence. Of how thin that line can be when ego eclipses empathy. And he thinks of the ranch hand who mistook a body for discarded clothes. So much of history begins with misrecognition. He exhales slowly. The file is closed. The suspect is dead. The plaque stands. The science is settled. Yet the story persists not as headline but as caution, quiet, unspoken, woven into how the town raises its daughters, installs its cameras, preserves its evidence. Justice arrived 19 years late. Truth arrived in fragments. Peace arrived unevenly. But accountability held. As rain continues its steady descent over rust-colored earth, Ruiz feels something close to acceptance, not because every question was answered, but because the essential one was. Who? That answer no longer floats unresolved. And sometimes, in a world where so many names fade into unsolved silence, that is the difference between a wound that festers and a scar that, though visible, no longer bleeds. The drizzle softens toward mist. Dawn will come soon. And in Texas, life will wake again, unaware of the footsteps once traced across wet grass, unaware of the rope once tightened in darkness, unaware that science, patience, and time conspired to refuse oblivion. Some stories end with certainty. Others end with memory. This one ends with both. Years pass in quieter increments now, marked less by headlines and more by absence. Daniel Ruiz learns the rhythm of retirement the way he once learned patrol routes, slowly, deliberately, aware that habit can masquerade as purpose if he lets it. Mornings are for coffee and newspapers. Afternoons for long drives without destination. Evenings for listening to the distant hum of highway traffic that never seems to stop, as if the world refuses to pause for anyone. And yet, some nights, he dreams in red dirt and drizzle. In the dream, he is back at the fence line. The grass is taller than it was in 1998, swaying under a sky that never fully brightens. He hears footsteps but never sees who they belong to. He calls out, but his voice makes no sound. Then he wakes, pulse steady but mind unsettled, aware that even solved cases embed themselves deeper than unsolved ones. Because once you know who did it, the mind begins trying to understand how and why in endless loops. Across town, the diner has changed owners again. The building has been remodeled so completely that only long-time residents recognize its bones. Teenagers working late shifts now were born years after the trial. They know the name Emily Carter only if their parents told them. To them, the parking lot is just asphalt and faded paint lines. They lock up at night under bright LED lights and working cameras that blink red, recording everything. The town council votes one spring to rename a small stretch of frontage road near the old ranch property Carter Lane. The decision passes, without controversy. It is not grand. Not a highway. Just a modest road sign installed quietly. Blue background. White letters. Carter Lane. Emily's mother attends the unveiling. She runs her fingers along the edge of the sign, as if confirming it is real. Reporters ask how it feels. She answers simply, "It feels like she's still here." But presence and permanence are not the same. Ruiz stands at the back of the small gathering, hands folded. He does not step forward for photographs. He watches the way wind catches at the edge of the cloth before the sign is revealed, lifting it briefly, as if the name underneath is impatient to be seen. Later that evening, he drives down Carter Lane alone. The road curves gently toward the area where the fence line once dominated open land. Development has thinned the isolation that once made it an ideal dumping ground. Houses, the horizon now. Porch lights glow where darkness once ruled. He wonders if Grady would have acted differently had those houses existed in 1998. Or if the impulse that drove him required only opportunity, not seclusion. The human mind, Ruiz knows, searches for environmental explanations because they feel manageable. Install more lights. Build more homes. Add more cameras. But the origin of violence often lives elsewhere, inside fragile egos and unexamined resentments. One autumn afternoon, Ruiz receives an unexpected package in the mail. No return address. Inside, a photocopy of an old employment roster from 1998 listing diner staff schedules. Emily's name highlighted. Next to it, in different ink, someone has written. He watched her pattern. There is no signature. He studies the document carefully. The handwriting is unfamiliar. The implication is not new. Investigators long suspected surveillance, but the anonymity unsettles him. Someone out there still thinking about the case deeply enough to send reminders. He debates turning it over to the department, but ultimately does. Procedure never fully leaves a detective. The younger officers review it, find nothing actionable, no traceable sender. The note becomes another thin thread in a tapestry already woven. Yet it reinforces something Ruiz has long believed. Cases like this ripple outward farther than visible. A teacher in town assigns students a project on local history. One group chooses the Carter case. They interview residents, review archived newspaper articles, study the advancement of DNA technology that cracked the investigation open. Their presentation is factual, clinical, stripped of emotional weight. Familial match through Cody's database, one student explains confidently. Direct DNA confirmation led to conviction. Ruiz is invited to watch. He sits in the back of the classroom, listening as teenagers describe events that once consumed his waking hours. They speak of it as past tense, solved, complete. It strikes him how efficiently history flattens experience. Afterward, one student approaches him hesitantly. "Do you think he ever felt bad?" she asks. There it is again. The question that persists across generations. Ruiz considers his answer carefully. "I think he felt something," he says, "but not enough to stop."
The student nods slowly, absorbing that.
On the drive home, rain begins once more, unexpected, brief, but unmistakable. The windshield wipers sweep in steady rhythm. For a moment, visibility blurs, and he is transported back through decades to flashing patrol lights reflecting off wet grass. But this time, there is no radio crackle, no dispatch call, just the quiet interior of his own car. He realizes then that the case no longer feels like an open wound. It feels like a scar he carries willingly, not because it defines him, but because it proved something essential, that patience and preservation matter. That evidence stored carefully can speak when technology evolves. That time does not automatically erase truth. Thomas Grady's grave remains unvisited except by distant relatives. Grass grows evenly across it. No vandalism. No public spectacle. Just a name, dates, and silence. Emily Carter's grave, by contrast, still receives flowers. Not daily. Not weekly. But often enough that the caretaker notices. Notes tucked beneath arrangements, sometimes read simply, "We remember." Memory becomes the final custodian. As winter approaches, Ruiz finds himself walking less, driving more. Age settles into his knees the way time settled into that old case file. He no longer feels the urgency to revisit the fence line. He has seen it enough. Instead, he begins writing, not a memoir, not for publication, but for himself. He writes about the early frustration, about the call from the lab confirming the DNA match, about the hospital conversation where fragments of truth slipped through failing bravado. He writes about the importance of collecting evidence even when it seems useless. He writes about ego, about misinterpretation, about the thin boundary between perceived humiliation and violence. He does not romanticize it. He documents it. Because stories told accurately resist distortion. On the final page of the notebook, he writes a single sentence. Justice arrived because someone saved what others might have discarded. It is not poetic. It is practical. And it is true. On a mild evening in early spring, he drives once more down Carter Lane as twilight settles over Texas. The sky glows faintly pink before fading into indigo. Porch lights flicker on. Dogs bark in distant yards. Life hums forward, unconcerned with history. He slows near the stretch closest to where the body was found. There is no visible marker from the road. Only houses now. Fences.
Lawns.
Children's bicycles left near driveways. He does not stop. He keeps driving. Because some places no longer need revisiting to remain remembered. The drizzle does not fall tonight. The air is clear. And for the first time in years, the memory of that April morning feels less like a storm cloud overhead and more like a distant horizon, still present, but no longer threatening to break. Texas 1998 cold case solved. DNA breakthrough stunned investigators. The headline remains archived online, searchable, factual. But beyond the headline lies something quieter and more enduring, the understanding that truth can survive neglect, that science can bridge decades, and that even when motives remain partially buried, accountability matters. The road curves gently ahead. Ruiz follows it home. The years after the arrest did not quiet the town. They sharpened it. Every memory was re-examined under a harsher light. Every photograph was studied like evidence. Every word ever spoken about that night was replayed in kitchens, in diners, in parked cars with engines idling long after midnight. People had believed that a solved cold case would bring peace. Instead, it brought excavation. Old wounds reopened. Old suspicion surfaced. And beneath it all lingered a single, corrosive question. If the DNA had been there all along, what else had everyone missed? Court filings spilled into public view, thick stacks of paper stamped with dates and motions and procedural language that felt too clean for what they described. The prosecution laid out its timeline with surgical precision. The victim had left work at 9:12 p.m. She had been seen at a gas station at 9:27 p.m. She never made it home. Her car was found abandoned near a drainage ditch on the outskirts of town, keys still in the ignition, purse untouched. The original investigation had cataloged everything: fibers, fingerprints, tire impressions, but the biological trace recovered from beneath her fingernails had been too degraded for testing in 1998. 2 decades later, the same scrap of material had become the loudest voice in the room. The defense pushed back hard. They spoke of contamination, of lab transfers, of evidence rooms that had changed hands over years, even decades. They reminded everyone that DNA is powerful, but it is not infallible. They painted a portrait of a man who had lived quietly, paid his taxes, coached Little League. They questioned why it took 25 years to identify him if the science was so certain. They asked why no witness had ever named him. They asked why there was no confession. The courtroom air felt thick, electric, as if every word struck metal. Outside the courthouse, cameras lined the steps like sentinels. Reporters repeated the phrase over and over: Texas 1998 cold case solved. The headline had weight. It had rhythm. It had closure embedded in it. But inside the community, closure felt more complicated. Some neighbors said they had always sensed something off about him, though they could never quite articulate it. Others defended him fiercely, insisting the arrest was a tragic overreach driven by technology's blind confidence. Families split along invisible lines. Church pews held quiet tension where once there had been easy greetings. Then the unexpected twist. Another review of archived evidence uncovered a second partial DNA profile, unidentified, incomplete, but undeniably present. It had been too faint to matter in 1998. It had been overshadowed by the primary match in 2023. But there it was, logged in sterile lab notes, a shadow profile that refused to disappear. Was it contamination? Was it incidental? Or was it a whisper of someone else who had stood in the dark that night? Investigators downplayed it publicly. Privately, it rattled them. Cold cases are fragile things. They are built on layers of memory, documentation, preservation. One unexpected fragment can unsettle the entire structure. They revisited the original crime scene photos, grainy images of yellow tape fluttering against scrubland. They re-interviewed aging witnesses whose recollections had softened around the edges. They traced phone records long archived on microfilm. Every thread led back to the same fact: the victim had fought. The skin beneath her nails had been torn, not gently, not accidentally. Someone had been close enough to feel her resistance. In town, rumors bloomed like wildfire. Some said the second profile belonged to a transient who had been in the area that week. Others whispered about a former boyfriend who had left Texas abruptly months after the murder. Social media amplified everything, turning speculation into spectacle. Amateur sleuths dissected documents, zoomed in on photographs, circled faces in crowd shots from 1998. The cold case had been solved, officially. Unofficially, it had multiplied. Meanwhile, the family lived in a different rhythm entirely. For them, the arrest had not been about headlines. It had been about a bedroom frozen in time, about birthdays marked with silence, about a mother who never stopped listening for a knock that never came. They sat through hearings with steady composure, hands clasped, eyes forward. They had waited a quarter of a century for this moment. They did not want it complicated by technicalities. They did not want it undone by doubt. The prosecution introduced expert testimony explaining the evolution of DNA analysis, how degraded samples could now yield profiles once thought impossible, how probabilistic genotyping software could calculate likelihood ratios that dwarfed coincidence. Charts appeared on screens. Percentages. Statistical language meant to translate uncertainty into clarity. Jurors listened, some nodding, some frowning, absorbing the weight of science that had matured while the victim's case lay dormant. Yet even as the numbers spoke, there was the human element that refused to be quantified. The defendant's expression rarely shifted. He watched the proceedings with a stillness that unsettled some observers. Was it stoicism?
Shock.
Or the practiced calm of someone who had rehearsed this possibility in the privacy of his own thoughts for years? No one could say. In cold cases, the gap between what is known and what is felt remains vast. Then came testimony from an old friend of the victim, someone who had not spoken publicly in decades. She described the last conversation they had shared, mundane details about weekend plans, laughter about a coworker's joke. Her voice trembled only once, when she said she had always believed the answer was out there, waiting. She had imagined a stranger, a drifter, someone passing through. Hearing the name of someone who had lived within miles all along felt like betrayal layered upon grief. As weeks stretched on, the narrative shifted subtly. The second DNA fragment lingered in the background, never fully dismissed, never fully embraced. Investigators quietly ran it through updated databases again. No hits. They expanded the search to broader genealogical pools, aware of the privacy debates swirling nationwide. The science that had cracked one barrier now pressed against another. The community's sense of safety wavered. If the arrested man was guilty, they had unknowingly lived beside a killer for decades. If he was not, then a different shadow still walked free. Either scenario fractured the illusion that time alone could neutralize danger. Parents who had grown up during the original investigation now had teenagers of their own, and they found themselves repeating warnings once given to them. Lock your doors, call if you're late, trust your instincts. Late one evening, as a storm rolled across the Texas sky, lightning illuminated the courthouse dome in stark flashes. Inside, jurors deliberated behind closed doors. The building felt like it was holding its breath. Outside, a small group of residents gathered silently, umbrellas tilted against the rain, waiting for a verdict that promised either validation or upheaval. In that charged pause, the case seemed to exist in two timelines at once. The past, where a young woman's life ended abruptly on a dark roadside, and the present, where technology had resurrected her voice in the form of genetic code. The phrase cold case had once implied distance, dormancy, dust. Now it felt combustible, alive, unpredictable. And beneath the thunder, beneath the murmurs, beneath the hum of cameras and whispered prayers, one truth remained immutable. The night of 1998 could not be rewritten. It could only be interpreted. Whether the DNA breakthrough would stand unchallenged or unravel under scrutiny, whether the shadow profile would ever find a name, whether the community would heal or fracture further, those answers hovered just out of reach, like heat rising from asphalt after rain, visible yet impossible to grasp. The verdict did not arrive with a bang. It arrived with a stillness, so heavy it seemed to press the oxygen out of the courtroom. When the jurors filed back in, faces drawn, eyes fixed forward, every heartbeat in that room felt synchronized, brutal and loud. The clerk stood. The words were read.
Guilty.
For a split second, no one moved. Then the sound came, not cheers, not applause, but a fractured exhale that rippled through wooden benches and polished floors. The family of the victim gripped each other as if the ground might give way. Reporters sprinted for the doors. Outside, the headline wrote itself again. Texas 1998 cold case solved. DNA breakthrough stuns investigators. The phrase felt heavier now, cemented by a jury's decision. Official, legal, final. But even as the defendant was led away in cuffs, his face pale under fluorescent lights, something unsettled remained. The defense team moved quickly, filing notice of appeal before the ink on the verdict sheet felt dry. They cited the secondary DNA fragment. They questioned the handling of evidence across decades. They pointed to the absence of eyewitness testimony, the lack of motive clearly articulated. They insisted the jury had been seduced by science that felt absolute but was, in reality, interpretive. The prosecution countered with confidence. The primary DNA match was astronomically strong. The probability of coincidence was so low it defied comprehension. They reminded everyone that cold cases rarely come wrapped in perfect narratives. Time erodes clarity. Memory fades. Evidence decays. But the biological trace recovered beneath the victim's fingernails had not lied. Yet back in the community, conversations did not stop. They intensified. Some residents felt vindicated, their long-held suspicions affirmed. Others grew quieter, uneasy about the unanswered fragment that still lingered in laboratory logs. The second profile had not matched anyone in state or federal databases. It existed as a ghost in the system, real, documented, but nameless. Investigators reopened the file quietly, not to undermine the conviction but to exhaust every loose end. They re-examined crime scene photographs with updated enhancement software. They tracked down former lab technicians now retired, asking about storage conditions, chain of custody protocols, refrigeration logs from the late 1990s. Each detail mattered. Each anomaly could either fortify the case or fracture it. Then a new development surfaced, an anonymous letter sent to a local news station. It claimed the real story had not been told. It suggested more than one person had been present that night. The handwriting was erratic, the paper unremarkable, the postmark smudged. Most dismissed it as opportunistic noise drawn to a high-profile conviction. But detectives could not afford to ignore it. They tested the envelope for DNA. Nothing usable. They analyzed linguistic patterns. No clear leads. Still, the idea lingered. More than one shadow in the dark. The victim's family tried to reclaim normalcy. They visited her grave after the verdict, laying fresh flowers against cool stone. For them, justice did not erase loss. It simply gave shape to it. For 25 years, grief had been shapeless, drifting, unanswered. Now it had a name attached, a face. A sentence handed down by a judge whose voice did not waver as he pronounced decades behind bars. Inside prison walls, the convicted man maintained his innocence. Through attorneys, he spoke of flawed science and tunnel vision. He pointed to cases across the country where convictions built on older methodologies had later unraveled. He insisted the secondary DNA profile was proof the investigation had stopped too soon once a convenient match appeared. His words found a small but vocal audience online, where debates about forensic reliability burned hot. Meanwhile, advancements in genealogical databases continued at breakneck speed. New profiles were uploaded daily by citizens curious about ancestry, unaware that their genetic breadcrumbs could unlock crimes long buried. Investigators quietly reran the secondary fragment against expanding pools, chasing even the faintest possibility of identification. The science that had stunned investigators once might do so again. The town itself bore the invisible scars of the saga. A mural dedicated to the victim now covered a brick wall near the courthouse, her painted eyes gazing outward, frozen in youth. People left candles there on the anniversary of her disappearance. Some came seeking closure. Others came seeking reassurance that darkness, once named, loses power. Yet the mural seemed to ask its own silent question: was everything truly known? Appeal hearings introduced fresh tension. Defense experts dissected the probabilistic software used to interpret the degraded sample, arguing that algorithmic models could amplify uncertainty under the guise of precision. Prosecutors responded with counter-experts who described layers of validation, peer review, cross-laboratory verification. Technical terms flooded transcripts, allele frequencies, stochastic effects, likelihood ratios, language dense enough to obscure the raw human tragedy beneath it. As months passed, the appellate court deliberated. The conviction stood for now. The primary DNA evidence remained admissible. The verdict held. Yet the secondary fragment was acknowledged in judicial opinion as unresolved, its presence noted but deemed insufficient to overturn the weight of the primary match. A footnote in legal text. A whisper preserved in official record. The cold case, once dormant, had transformed into something else entirely, a living debate about science, memory, and justice. Universities referenced it in forensic seminars. Podcasts dissected it episode by episode. Law students argued its merits in classrooms hundreds of miles away. What began as a single violent night in 1998 had expanded into a case study on the evolution of criminal investigation. Still, when the courthouse lights dimmed each evening and the streets emptied, the town returned to quieter rhythms. Wind moved through scrubland beyond the drainage ditch, where the car had been found all those years ago. The asphalt had been repaved, the weeds cut back, but the air there felt different, as if memory clung to soil in ways invisible to passing drivers. And in that quiet, one fact persisted. A breakthrough in DNA had delivered a conviction, had stunned investigators, had reshaped a narrative once believed unsolvable. Yet justice, even when declared in open court, rarely erases every question. Sometimes it illuminates new ones. Sometimes it reveals that truth is layered, complex, resistant to tidy endings. The file labeled Texas 1998 no longer carried the stamp cold case in bold red ink. It had been reclassified, archived under closed. But anyone who followed its long arc understood something deeper, that cases like this never truly close. They echo. In courtrooms, in headlines, in whispered doubts, in the quiet spaces where science and human frailty intersect. The night remains unchanged. A young woman drove into darkness and never came home. Decades later, technology reached back and named a culprit. A jury agreed. A judge sentenced. A town exhaled. And somewhere within laboratory databases and aging evidence logs, a faint secondary profile still waits, silent, incomplete, unresolved, like a final shadow cast by a storm that once tore through Texas and refuses, even now, to disappear. Years pass differently after verdict. They do not crawl the way they did during the decades of uncertainty. They move with a strange, uneven rhythm, faster on the surface, slower underneath, as if time itself is testing whether the word justice can hold its weight. The man convicted in the Texas 1998 case sits behind reinforced glass during appeal hearings, older now, hair thinner, posture slightly bent. The headlines have faded from national news cycles, replaced by fresher tragedies, newer shocks. But inside legal briefs and forensic conferences, his name still circulates. The phrase DNA breakthrough still triggers debate. The conviction still sparks argument over probabilistic software, secondary transfer, laboratory protocol. What once felt like a triumphant conclusion now reads like a landmark moment, celebrated by some, scrutinized by others. The appellate process drags on. Motions filed. Motions denied. Technicalities dissected with surgical precision. Defense attorneys push for independent reanalysis of the original biological sample using next-generation sequencing methods unavailable even at the time of trial. Prosecutors resist, arguing the integrity of the evidence has already been tested, validated, upheld. Judges weigh precedent against innovation, stability against doubt. Then, in a quiet laboratory hundreds of miles away, a new test begins. The preserved sample, what remains of it, is minuscule, fragile, carefully thawed under controlled conditions. Technicians move slowly, aware that this may be the final opportunity to extract anything meaningful. The goal is not to challenge the primary match. It is to examine the faint secondary profile more deeply. Years of advancement have sharpened sensitivity. Where once there was noise, there may now be signal. Weeks pass. Data accumulates. Analysts compare allele patterns against expanded genealogical databases that have grown exponentially as millions submit DNA for ancestry reports. Software runs calculations through the night. And then, a partial familial connection emerges. Not a direct match. Not a name. But a cluster. A distant relative in another state whose genetic markers align disturbingly well with the shadow profile. Investigators move cautiously. They trace family trees, mapping branches that spread across counties and decades. One branch leads back to Texas in the late 1990s. A young man at the time. Transient employment. Minor criminal record. Nothing violent. Nothing that would have placed him high on any suspect list during the original investigation. He had left town months after the murder. He is older now, living quietly under a different rhythm of life. Surveillance begins discreetly. A discarded coffee cup retrieved. A cigarette butt collected from a parking lot. The DNA is tested. The match is strong. Not to the primary sample that secured the conviction, but to the secondary fragment long dismissed as peripheral. The ghost in the file now has genetic shape. A real person. A real history. A presence that cannot be ignored. The revelation detonates quietly at first, confined to conference rooms and secure calls between district attorneys. Then it breaks. News stations interrupt programming. Online headlines explode with disbelief. Second DNA identified in 1998 Texas case. New genetic link raises questions. The phrase cold case resurfaces with force, now tangled in controversy rather than closure. The family is notified privately before the story goes public. The conversation is careful, measured. Prosecutors explain that the original conviction remains intact for now. The primary DNA under the victim's fingernails still matches the incarcerated man. The jury's decision still stands. But the presence of another individual at the scene can no longer be theoretical. It is biological fact. Shock ripples outward. If a second man was present, what was his role? Witness? Accomplice? Perpetrator? Did the original defendant act alone or at all? The newly identified individual is brought in for questioning. He denies knowing the victim, denies being near the drainage ditch, denies everything. But confronted with the genetic evidence, his composure fractures momentarily. Just a flicker, a tightening around the eyes, a pause half a second too long. Investigators reconstruct the timeline again, layering this new presence over the old narrative. Phone records, once considered irrelevant, are re-examined. Witness statements from 1998 are reread through altered lenses. A report surfaces noting that 2 sets of tire impressions were found near the abandoned car, though only one had been analyzed thoroughly at the time. The detail had seemed insignificant in a case overwhelmed by leads. Now it feels glaring. Legal pressure mounts rapidly. Defense attorneys for the convicted man file an emergency motion for review, arguing that the discovery of a second DNA contributor fundamentally alters the evidentiary landscape. They assert that the jury never heard this possibility in full clarity. They demand a new trial. Advocacy groups amplify their call, citing the risk of wrongful conviction in complex forensic cases. The prosecution faces an impossible balancing act: to acknowledge the significance of the secondary match without undermining the original verdict, to pursue truth without unraveling justice. Public statements grow cautious. Words like ongoing investigation and procedural review dominate press conferences. Inside prison walls, the convicted man hears the news through his attorney. For the first time in years, his expression shifts visibly during a visit. Not triumph, not relief, something sharper, something like validation. He maintains his innocence with renewed force, insisting he had been near the victim earlier that evening but left before anything happened, a claim dismissed during trial as opportunistic. Now it echoes differently. The newly identified man's background reveals proximity. He had worked briefly at a warehouse near the victim's route home. He had acquaintances who frequented the same gas station she visited that night. His departure from Texas weeks after the crime, once meaningless, now draws scrutiny. As forensic analysts overlay both DNA profiles, a chilling possibility emerges. The biological evidence suggests struggle involving more than one person. Mixed patterns consistent with multiple contributors during physical contact. The science does not narrate motive. It does not describe sequence. But it implies presence, close, immediate, undeniable. The community, once exhausted by decades of waiting, finds itself thrust back into uncertainty. Old arguments reignite. Those who believed firmly in the original conviction feel destabilized. Those who harbored quiet doubt feel vindicated. Social media fractures into camps overnight. Court hearings resume under intense scrutiny. Cameras crowd hallways again. Legal scholars debate whether the new evidence meets the threshold for vacating a conviction. Some argue the primary DNA remains overwhelming. Others contend that the existence of another contributor creates reasonable doubt that cannot be ignored. The victim's family stands at the center of a storm they never asked to endure twice. Grief resurfaces with fresh edges. Closure, once grasped tightly, feels like sand slipping through fingers. They want certainty. They want the right person held accountable. They want the truth, whatever it is. In a packed courtroom, a judge reviews motions with grave deliberation. The air feels identical to the day of the original verdict, tense, expectant, electric. Legal arguments collide like steel. Science is dissected again, this time with even sharper tools. Outside, the mural of the victim watches over it all, unchanged. Candles flicker beneath painted eyes that seem almost alive in the evening light. And as experts testify about allele distributions and transfer probabilities, as attorneys debate intent and presence, one stark reality crystallizes. The Texas 1998 case was never a straight line from darkness to light. It was a maze, a collision of memory and molecule, of certainty declared too soon and doubt discovered too late. The term cold case solved once rang like a triumph. Now it echoes with complexity. DNA stunned investigators once. It has stunned them again. Because sometimes science does not close a door. Sometimes it opens another. And in the quiet after each courtroom session, when microphones power down and the courthouse empties into warm Texas night air, the question hangs heavier than ever. Who, truly, was in the dark that night? And has justice finally caught up with the truth, or is it still one revelation away?